All right, we are going to talk a little bit about photorealism today. And photorealism is an art movement that came about around 1960. And before we talk about photorealism, I want to talk a little bit about the art movements that happened before photorealism. So one of the things you're going to need to know is what is an art movement? An art movement is a series of artworks that have similar aesthetics and exist in a certain time of history. So art movements would be the Renaissance, Impressionism, pop art, photorealism, which we're going to talk about today, Baroque. There's a lot of different art movements, and they're all pretty chronological in history and really have a lot to do with the time in which they were created. So art kind of is a statement, a visual statement about the time in which it's created, and it has a lot of functions such as recording history, making visual statements that the artist might want to make, but also kind of preserving how life was and kind of works as a tool for us to now look back at today and kind of get a good idea of what it was like to live in a certain time. Um, so before photorealism, actually we're going to start in about 1880, and what happens in about 1880 is Impressionism comes along. So Claude Monet starts painting scenes that are real, such as the water lily ponds and the footbridge, which he's famous for, but he starts painting them in a little bit of an abstracted way. You can tell where his brush strokes are. He has an unrealistic sense of line, and he uses an unrealistic sense of color. He's making artistic choices as far as the elements of art and principles of design go, and he's not trying to paint exactly what he sees. He's trying to paint something that he thinks is interesting for a viewer. So artists are starting to use, when Impressionism comes along, artists start to use the elements of art and principles of design in an unrealistic way. So the elements of art would be line, shape, color, texture, value, and space. You can find those online. It's very easy, just Google elements of art. Principles of design are balance, unity, contrast, movement, pattern, rhythm, and emphasis. You can also look those up as well. You definitely want to write those down for yourself because you're going to be using this language when you are critiquing a work of art, which is kind of the end assignment for this presentation. So right before photorealism comes along, artwork is really starting to get pretty unrealistic. We have Claude Monet with Impressionism, we have Vincent van Gogh with Post-Impressionism, and things just keep getting less and less realistic. We have minimalism in the 1920s that comes along, and instead of being representational, it's really just artists using the elements of art and principles of design to create an interesting composition. So Rothko's really interested in color and size, value. If you look very closely at some of Rothko's paintings, you can see a lot of different shades of color within the color field, such as this red right here. Another minimalist artist is Frank Stella, and he is using line and color, a little bit of value, but he's really using line and color for his elements. A little bit of shape, not really much texture, and he definitely uses space in an interesting way. He fills up space, but with his use of shape and with his use of color, he's creating pattern and movement and rhythm. So he's using the elements of art and principles of design in an interesting way, not in a representational way, but in an interesting way that's very different than what had been going on 100 years ago. So a representational art movement, but still pretty unrealistic, is the pop art movement. Pop art artists such as Lichtenstein, who was really interested in comic book art, very comic looking, unrealistic line, unrealistic value. Really aren't any values to create form in this girl's skin. Artists such as Andy Warhol. A lot of these images that we're looking at right now aren't famous pop art artists. They're kind of um, artwork that's inspired, such as this guy. I think that's the PSY Gangnam Style person, painted in a pop art style, but not specifically from the pop art movement, which was around the 60s. This is Andy Warhol, who is coined as the father of pop art, and he was very interested in painting, or actually silk screening, celebrities and other things from the culture, such as Campbell soup cans, Coca-Cola bottles, etc., etc. But celebrities were another big thing. So this is representational. You can obviously tell it's a person, but it's pretty unrealistic. Unrealistic use of color, unrealistic use of line, high sense of contrast, which also adds to the unrealistic sense of this image. And right around the same time that pop art's happening, what happens is some artists start rejecting this notion of art being unrealistic, and they start to go back into a realistic representation of artwork. So photorealism is an art movement that happened around 1960, and artists are really trying to achieve a painting that it's really hard for the viewer to tell if it's a painting or a photo. It's going to be even harder for us to tell in this presentation because these are photos of paintings, so it's really hard to tell that is this a painting or is this a photo. I will tell you that all of these artworks that we're looking at right now are paintings. This Coca-Cola picture is very hard to tell that it's a painting. It looks so realistic. The artist is using color in a very realistic way, line and shape and space in a very realistic way. His reflections are so realistic, and his use of light is very realistic. So it does look like a photo, but it is really a painting. And so these artists are going into the minute detail in their creation of a work of art to really fool your eye. Here's another one by Charles Bell, The Gumball Machine, created in 1975. You can see a reflection of light on all of those gumballs, but also you can see a reflection of light on the actual gumball machine as well. And those thoughtful details that Charles Bell is using is really making this artwork look very realistic, such as a photo would look. This artwork to me is a little bit easier to tell that it's a painting, but it still has that same sense of light and looks very realistic. A little hard to tell that is this a photo or is this a painting. Robert Bechtlet, Grand Torino from 1974. So you can see his use of light, which is similar to the other two works that we've looked at already. This one's one of my favorite ones because it really does look like a photo, and I can just imagine how hard it might be to paint this because it's very hard to paint a person so realistically, let alone a person look like they're looking through glass with raindrops on it. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to draw or paint a raindrop or a droplet of water, but it's quite difficult to make it look realistic. So this is one of my favorite artworks. You can tell maybe this girl is in the shower or something. She looks like her hair is wet, or maybe she's outside standing in the rain and looking in from a window, and we as the viewers are inside a dry house. I'm not quite sure, but the point is that it's very realistic looking. Every tiny detail the artist could possibly observe, they've recreated in their artwork to make this artwork look realistic. So many different values within the colors to really make this person's face look round, the lips look round, and the raindrops look plump and full of water and really wet. And so this artwork, the one on the left, let's see, the one on the left is photorealism and the one on the right is actually pop art. So I chose to put these two artworks together so we could compare and contrast photorealism on the left and pop art on the right. Two paintings of the same topic in two different art styles, a roast beef dinner. The one on the left, I can almost feel like I can crush those mashed potatoes with my fork or peel apart the meat from the roast beef. Wayne Thiebaud's on the right is much more comical, an unrealistic use of color, and definitely not as many values to make it look unrealistic. It does look pretty unrealistic, you know, there's no way you could confuse this for a photo. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but two different pieces of work and two different art styles definitely both have historical value as far as the art world goes. And we're going to end on this picture. I really like this picture because to paint something that is actually see-through is quite difficult. So painting this cellophane, you really have to have a realistic view or a realistic way of recreating light. You really have to look closely. Think about how hard it was to create some of the folds in the cloth on the still life that we drew. And then think about all of the folds in this plastic wrap and how hard it would be to really lay those out and paint them exactly as you're witnessing them. Also look at the girl's hair. Very realistically painted. So many different shades of hair in the braid to make it look very realistic. Such a great use of light and really using the values of the color to create form in this artwork. So what our actual assignment is going to be is to critique a work of art in the style of photorealism. So when I'm talking about critiquing, we've done a little bit of critiquing in class of our own work and of each other's work, of our classmates' work, but really this assignment is about critiquing a work of fine art, an existing artwork created by an existing working artist. So we're going to break it down into 4 steps. 1 is describing, 2 is analyzing, 3 is interpreting, and 4 is judging. If you want this handout that you see right now, you can go to the Ellsworth High School website, go to the Visual Performing Arts department, and then click on Shannon Westfall, and there is a copy of this critique right there. And I actually think it is in my Evernote folder, which you have a link to on my website. So if you open up the Evernote folder for Intro to Art, you'll have all of these handouts that I might be talking about in these videos, anything you've gotten in class, anything that I hand out to Art 1 students. There's a couple other art critique handouts in the folder as well, so if you're confused after looking at this one, there's a couple more handouts that break down these 4 steps even more, explain what it means to describe, explain what it means to analyze, interpret, and judge. So you can find that right on my website. We are going to critique a work of art by Chuck Close. Just trying to find it on my desktop here. And we are going to critique this work of art by Chuck Close. So we're going to start by describing. So just take a second and think about everything you see in this photo. We're just naming objects that we see in this photo. Go ahead and write those down. So I see a man with glasses, dark hair, smile on his face, doesn't look like he's sad or upset. He's got a collared shirt on underneath the sweater maybe, and he's got a little bit of facial hair. So that's just what I see. I'm just naming the objects. Step 2 would be analyze. How is the work organized? How is the artist using the elements of art and principles of design? So again, we have line, shape, color, texture, value, and space. We also have balance, unity, contrast, movement, pattern, rhythm, and emphasis. The first list was the elements and the second list was the principles. So I'm looking at this artwork and I'm saying Chuck Close is using line in a pretty realistic way, the way he has recreated the plaid in the shirt of this man. His color is also pretty realistic. He has a lot of different values within his color. just looking at the skin, there's so many different values in the skin on this guy that really starts to create some pretty realistic form and make this guy look like he truly does exist in space. Even though this is a very flat painting, I can tell the roundness of this guy's head because of the way Chuck Close is using color and recreating form by using realistic values. I really like the way that Chuck Close has such a great sense of texture in this painting. I can feel the softness of this guy's plaid shirt. I can feel the scruff on this guy's face and the hairiness of the hair on top of his head and the shininess and hardness of the plastic of his glasses. And I can really almost feel the oil in the skin by the way Chuck Close has used light. So that would be the analyzing step. Now I'm going to move on to the third step, and I'm going to interpret. What is this work about? What discoveries have I made in the last two steps? Well, this artwork's about a guy. I can tell that by the way that the only thing in the artwork is a guy. He's really emphasized because this portrait takes up the whole picture. His head takes up the whole canvas. So by the way Chuck Close uses size on this guy's head and body, he's really emphasizing the fact that this is a portrait of a guy. Nothing else is in the picture. The way that he is using color is really balancing out this picture. So in the middle we have a lot of reds with the skin and the plaid flannel shirt, but on the bottom where the sweater, the black sweater, and on the top the black hair, he's really contrasted the red with the black, but also he's created a sense of balance with the two black spaces. If this guy was bald or had blonde hair, my eye might settle on the bottom of the painting with the sweater, or it might go off the top of the page and not really come back to finding the rest of the details of this painting. But the black on the top of the painting with the hair and the black on the bottom of the painting really helps my eye stay on the picture and notice all of the details that Chuck Close has added. I also really am looking at how he's used texture, and I'm thinking this guy, maybe he's not that much of a professional, but he definitely is put together. So he does have a little bit of facial hair, the way that Chuck Close has used texture. So he, definitely he's not completely clean shaven, but he's also not very messy. So I can tell maybe he's like a middle class person. Also the use of color in his hair. It looks like he has a little bit of gray in his hair, so maybe he's a little bit older, 40s about. Also, just what he's wearing, the glasses and the shirt make me think maybe he is somebody who was living in the 90s or the 80s. So that's my interpretation of this painting by what I see. Now the fourth and last step is I get to judge this work. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Why or why not? When you judge a piece of artwork, you should never say, I like it because it's good. I don't like it because it's bad. Explain to me why it's bad, or explain to me why you think it's good, using the elements of art or the principles of design. So I personally really like this painting. I really like the way that Chuck Close has used light to make me really feel like this painting is a photo, and I can feel all the different textures and surfaces on his painting, even though if I did touch the painting, it would just feel like a painting. It wouldn't feel like a person's face. It does seem like if I touched it, it would feel like a person's face, or feel like a person's hair, or feel like a flannel shirt. So I really like the way he has realistically portrayed this person and used light and used texture and used value and used form to create a realistic interpretation of his friend in this painting. Also, I like the way he's balanced it out with the black hair and with the black sweater, like I said earlier, to keep my eye on the page. So that's just my opinion. You don't have to like the photo that you are critiquing, but you do have to tell me if you like it or not, and why or why not. So that's how you critique a work of art. What your specific assignment is to type 8 to 12 sentences on a work of art. doing all 4 of these steps, describing, analyzing, interpreting, and judging. Use complete sentences. Tell me what the art piece that you chose was. Tell me who the artist was. It can be anything you want, except it has to be a photorealism piece of artwork. So you can go to the San Francisco MoMA website, you can go to the Guggenheim website. Those have a lot of information on photorealism. You can also find pictures, paintings in that specific movement. Another thing you can always do is just Google image photorealism and then choose something that you like, and hopefully you can figure out who the artist is and what the name of the artwork is. You definitely want to know who the artist is. If you can't tell who the artist is, you shouldn't probably use that painting. So 8 to 12 sentences critiquing a work of art in the photorealistic movement. All these handouts again are on my website, and if you have any questions, please ask. This critique will be due on Monday, and then we'll move on to a India ink painting. All right, thank you very much.